I love Esther. Esther's a great book. It's obviously dramatic. Okay, I think we all like an underdog story, whether it's a fairy tale, sports, Villanova beating Georgetown or whatever it was. And it's certainly an underdog story. It's a story of a reversal that God brings about. So you have the situation of the Jews getting darker and darker and darker and darker as Haman plots against them and is successful, and he has a decree all laid out. These people are going to be destroyed, man, woman, child, all on a single day. And Mordecai is going to be hanged on this 75-foot pole I just constructed in my front yard. And things couldn't look any blacker for the Jews. And then the king has a sleepless night, and he calls for the scroll to be brought in, probably to put him to sleep. And he reads about an assassination plot Mordecai had uncovered, which he'd never been rewarded for. Haman happens to be in the courtyard, showing up, and so the king says, Haman, what shall I do? What should I do for somebody I want to honor? And of course Haman thinks, I'm the guy. What shall I have? Well, you should have him paraded through town on a horse. Not only that, you should have someone walk before him, proclaiming this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor, and so forth. And Haman ends up having to do that for Mordecai. And then Haman is begging Esther for mercy. The king thinks that he's acting inappropriately. Off with his head, he gets hanged on Mordecai's pole. And then the decrees are reversed. So it's a day of victory for the Jews against their enemies. And there's something in us, I think, in all of us that responds to that kind of reversal. It's told in a way that's a little different from a lot of other Bible stories, in that God is never mentioned in the book. You don't hear about prayer, the temple sacrifices. None of that religious stuff really shows up. It seems like a very secular story. Mordecai and Esther seem like very secular people. Okay, Esther gets to be queen by winning a beauty pageant. Question is whether she went willingly or not. People have all kinds of different opinions on that, on whether she should have participated, whether she had any choice. It's hard to say. But the book is not as overtly religious as a lot of other Old Testament stories. But that's a lot like our lives. We don't always know what God is up to. We can't always see what he's up to. Life seems very ordinary, and sometimes in retrospect we can see things. You realize, if I hadn't, been in that wedding party, I wouldn't have met my husband who was on the groom's side, and so on and so on. And you can look back and see what God was up to. But it's pretty rare that at the moment we know what God is doing. And yet when you read many other Bible narratives, we have that perspective of the author. And so we know, well, God is actually going to win this great victory, and he's going to do it this way. And he tells people ahead of time. And so I think the Book of Esther in many ways rings more true to our own lives. Ordinary things happen. The king couldn't sleep. How many times have we had sleepless nights and thought nothing about it? And yet that was what God used to turn the whole story around. And I think it's a book of real people. Esther we don't know how old she was. People speculate she may have been 15-ish, maybe. So here's this poor girl who is called upon to do something that was almost guaranteed to cost her life. You didn't go to the king unsummoned, ever. And there were people around his sword with axes who would behead people who did. And that's, we have accounts of that from Herodotus. So she had pretty good reason to think that if she went to the king, she was going to be toast. And I think she was terrified. I think she was absolutely terrified. And the fact that she was willing to do it anyway, I think is pretty remarkable. I think she was putting her life on the line. And in many ways, I see Jesus in that, reading it as a Christian. I act out the Book of Esther, and when I reach that point, I try to portray the agony of Esther making that decision to go to the king, even though she would probably die for it. And what's in the back of my mind as I play it is Jesus in Gethsemane saying, please, couldn't you take this cup away? But notwithstanding, not my will but yours be done. And I think that's the choice that Esther made. And she said, I'm willing to die for my people. And that shouts to me of Jesus. So I think maybe that's what the book is about.